Yeah, when I first started playing, I had terrible chops and had a really funky embouchure. And luckily I had some teachers who said, "Okay, you need to start working on this. You can't just keep playing this way." And so I literally did everything they told me. They were great teachers, so I really got um, the bug to like start working on getting things right, and literally changed the way my jaw worked, how my lips went together, the whole thing. And I uh, I got a lot of benefit out of that, and still to this day, I mean, I've always been a practicer. I like going on a gig not feeling like there's going to be anything that's going to surprise me terribly, you know.
Warning. This episode contains adult language and adult humor. Since when have trumpet players ever been considered adults? If you are easily offended by these types of conversations, consider switching to the oboe. Welcome to the Trumpet Gurus Hang podcast. I'm your host, Jose Johnson. My guest for this episode is Chris Jaudes. Chris, he's a powerhouse. From bebop to Broadway, from brass bands to big bands, Chris is one of New York's go-to guys. And when he's not lighting it up on the stage or crushing it in the pit, Chris is helping to mold the next generation of trumpet players as part of the jazz faculty at the prestigious Julliard School of Music. And his love for the trumpet is only matched by his love for life. So, pour yourself a big glass, pull up a chair, and let the hang begin. Welcome to this episode of the Trumpet Gurus Hang podcast, and I am joined by Chris Jaudes, all the way from the Big Apple, from New York City, the center of the universe. So, Chris, thank you so much for joining me today, man.
Thank you. It's nice to be here finally after seeing a few of these. It's nice to actually be participating.
Well, it's always my pleasure. So, folks, Chris and I have not met before today, which is another great thing. Yeah, that's part of the whole idea of the hang is getting to know somebody and doing it in a nice, casual, relaxed way. And I'm a firm believer that the things that are most important that we're going to learn from people are the way they view life, the way they view music, the way they view their craft, as opposed to the what's, so a lot of times we're too concerned about, like, how do you play a double high C, as opposed to why do you really need to play a double high C? So we'll talk about that later. But
it's going to be nice not to have to talk about mouthpieces. Yeah, that'd be perfect. Yeah.
Well, so let's start with the first question. So, Chris, what kind of mouthpiece? No. Yeah, it's so funny. We trumpet players are a goofy group, so definitely get gearheads. But so you've certainly been. Well, I know you've been affected by the pandemic, like the rest of us, in terms of the ability to do live performances, particularly because you were so active on the Broadway scene. But you also have your educational side of things. You're on the faculty there at Julliard. So, I mean, how did you manage to get through this really crazy time and maintain your sanity without being able to play out as much as you were used to doing?
Yeah, well, I wasn't that sane to begin with, but it has been a difficult time for everybody I know. I have been teaching throughout this, so that kind of keeps me involved. Most of it was via Zoom. Julliard just opened for the first time this year, 2 weeks ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it's been, and now the semester's over. I mean, the year's over. So we got in the building, and then that was it. We're done now. For me personally, I like practicing, and it was a good time to get a lot of practice in. Yeah. And I missed the gigs and all of that stuff. I did do some recordings, so that was. Kept me a little bit busy, but I love shedding, so that's what I did. I used it as a good time to practice and get my act together. Change things, worked on things, and I feel pretty good for doing it, but I'm ready to get back to work. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Well, I've talked to a few people who have said the same thing, that they kind of took the opportunity to fine tune some stuff, or to spend time doing things that they normally wouldn't do. I think the first person I talked to that mentioned that to me was my friend Serafin Aguilar out in L.A., because most of his work, playing lead, playing a lot of Latin, and just having to pound it every night. And he's like, man, it was really nice to be able to play a lot more ballads, and to work on my, my sound and things like that, that I just, as opposed to just trying to keep my chops up.
Right.
So, was there anything in particular that kind of caught your fancy, where you were like, hey, man, this is a great opportunity for me to explore this aspect of playing that I normally don't?
Well, I did a lot of classical exercises, thinking that that would be what I needed to do, just to try to keep the control stuff happening, and that worked out pretty good. I worked on some that I had never used before, so I found some that tired me out pretty quick. Not the usual Charlier or those kind of things, but really just exercises like I got this Vacchiano series, but then Mitch Jelen wrote some books with just a bunch of seemingly boring looking exercises in it, but they really work really well for just tearing up your chops.
Yeah.
And so that was great. That's what I needed. I needed to find something to make me tired, and that did it.
Well, and you said something really interesting. You said you love the shed, and that is something that, amazingly enough, not a lot of people really enjoy. They don't enjoy that practice process. I mean, they love gigging, but not getting in the shed. So, has that been something that's been part of your makeup since the beginning of your playing?
Yeah, when I first started playing, I had terrible chops, and had a really funky embouchure. Luckily I had some teachers who said, okay, you need to start working on this. You can't just keep playing this way. And so I literally did everything they told me. They were great teachers, so I really got the bug to start working on getting things right, and literally changed the way my jaw worked, how my lips went together, the whole thing. And I got a lot of benefit out of that. And still to this day, I mean, I've always been a practicer. I like going on a gig not feeling like there's going to be anything that's going to surprise me terribly,
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I've always done this. I just have not had this kind of time. I got to work on a little bit more of my own, just jazz playing, with some recordings and stuff here. A lot of times I don't get to do that as often as I like. And I've played every trumpet I have, which I haven't done in years.
Uh-huh.
So I've kind of I've got trumpets laying around all over on the floor and stuff like that, and some cornet stuff as well. So it gave me a chance to, do stuff I never got to do before. Plus we got a new dog, and I got to potty train the dog while I was at home, which was great.
Yeah. That's always nice, man. Yeah. When you're gigging and stuff like that, and you have to, not be there for those prime moments, especially with a dog.
Right.
Man, you come home to some very nasty surprises.
This is true, right?
Literally and figuratively.
This is right.
But when you're talking about like your practice, and retooling things, some people are just, give me a routine and I'll do it, and just kind of that rote thing. And some people are a little bit more introspective in the practice process, and they look at their practice as basically as a laboratory. I almost said laboratory. Suddenly I had Boris Karloff going on in my head. But they look at it as this place to experiment and to try and figure out exactly what's going on and how to fine tune or improve on things. So do you fall into one of those two camps more than another?
Yeah, I don't have. I mean, some people think this isn't the case, but it is for me. I had no natural skills on the trumpet. It wasn't built for me. I just really wanted to play one. And literally, I started playing in a Salvation Army band. So they handed me a cornet and said, okay, just learn these fingerings. And for some time, there was no actual guidance as to what I was supposed to do with my lips. Just learn the fingerings,
Right.
And so my jaw, my teeth are not in perfect alignment to play the trumpet. And of course, not that many people's are, but my jaw was kind of off to the side and I had some crooked teeth and all of that. So I basically just learned how to make it work. So my embouchure was real angled down like that, number one. And finally, I got a teacher who said, yeah, you're going to have to start all this over again and get this together. That wasn't until I made it through high school without any problems. But starting in my sophomore year in high school, I had two teachers, and they both worked on me pretty hard about getting my chops together. And so I had great instruction from that point on. Mm-hmm. And I'm very happy they put the time in. It was very frustrating for them, I know. So that's just the way I had to. I learned it wrong and then had to learn it right.
Mm-hmm. So those processes help you now in your role as an educator in some of the problem solving skills.
Absolutely. I actually meet a lot of people who don't really know what I'm talking about educators who don't know specifically what the chops do, or more importantly, what theirs do. They just put the horn on their face and they've learned to do that by repetition. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. If it's working great, that's fine. But for me, I had a lesson before this today, and we talked to my student who's a great jazz player. But I said, listen, over the summer, you got to work on your chops. You got to get that stuff together. And that meant making some adjustments so that he could improve his range, his sound, his control, his endurance, all of those things. If you're a jazz player and that's really all you want to do, is you just a lot of times you just keep playing the solos, and you don't have to have a lot of chops to do that because you get to decide
right
what you're going to play. Mm-hmm. And so I see that more often than I'd like to see that, but this guy responded really well today. I think it's going to be really great for him. He's a great player.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like, getting into that discussion about, technique and the level of technique that you have to have. And, do you need to be able to play Carnival of Venice at, 6,000 BPM? Or, what do you need? And it's, I think, all tied to our ability to communicate our ideas. And, with music being a form of communication, so certainly the better grasp you have of vocabulary, the more words you have and the fluency you have, that helps you in expressing your ideas. But, I think sometimes people they get an imbalance. So they're either too concerned with becoming a English historian as opposed to an English speaker. We use that analogy instead of music, or they just, they want to speak the language and they just, they don't care about anything else. So, finding that delicate balance of understanding what you need to do, how you need to do it, having the technical facility to do it. And then I think getting the heck out of your own way and just letting the music come out of you.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right about that. I'll also say this. You mentioned Carnival of Venice. So I finally, over this break, learned Carnival of Venice. There were two movements I couldn't play perfectly. Mm-hmm. And I finally corrected those, so I can play those. I won't bore you with it now, but those two movements were difficult for me all my whole life because I just never would spend the time on woodshedding them because thinking, when am I going to play this? It's not like you're going to get a concert and you're going to do Carnival of Venice. So I had the time to finally do that. So I feel like I can check something off of my list finally.
Your bucket mute list.
There you go. Right.
That's cool. So when did you kind of fall into your groove, if you will, professionally, as like, this is the path that I want to take. This is the music that I want to play. This is, the type of trumpet player I want to be. When did that kind of come together for you?
Well, as my chops got a little bit stronger, and I had a great teacher. I'm going to shout out his name in case he's listening. His name is Bob Ceccarini. He's from St. Louis, and Bob really invested some time and effort into me as a trumpet player, and got me on. Eventually, kind of worked through everything I should. He was very meticulous about getting the details taken care of, learning how to play properly. giving me the right stuff. He was a great jazz player, and also played with the St. Louis Symphony as the extra very often. Just a wonderful teacher too, very inspiring kind of guy. And he spent a lot of time with me, and to this day we're great friends, and talk about trumpet a lot. But he started taking me on gigs, saying this is, first just to watch him do them. And then he started hiring me for the gigs, and we ended up, working together on everything that happened in St. Louis until I moved to New York. Mm-hmm. And to this day, if I need some advice, I got about 6 people I would call who I think are the smartest people I know on the trumpet. And Bob is definitely at the top of that list.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that having not just a teacher, but having a mentor, because right. those are 2 different things, completely different things. And having that person that you have that deeper connection with, and that you kind of trust, not like a blind trust, but it's an earned trust that you can right. you can just trust innately, and that person is looking out for your best. That's so rare, and I think that I think everyone should do that, regardless of whether it's in trumpet or any aspect in your life. You should really try and have mentors in things that can kind of help to guide you along the best path possible.
Yeah, I think those of us that are teachers really need to take that to heart as well, because our students need that. There's a lot of different ways to go. There's a lot of places you can make a left turn instead of a right turn, and it really helps to really take an interest in your student and help them get focused in the right direction and on the right kind of stuff to practice as well.
Yeah. And speaking of which, I wanted to ask you about this. Because education is really an important topic for me. I think for everybody should be, not just for trumpet, but just in general. Because we're kind of put here to experience and to learn. That's what we're here for on this planet. And I think the education system, like so many other things, has gotten kind of broken over the years. Mostly because we found something that kind of worked at the time, and as the times and the needs have changed, we never really have aggressively sought to change the structure in which that information is disseminated. We become somewhat married to the dogma and to the institution, and not to the organic nature of learning, which is going to be an evolutionary process. So as a teacher, especially at a school like Julliard, where you're getting, some of the best of the best, the promising young talent is coming, to places like Julliard. When you have these new students come in, this is a 2-parter. What is the one thing that you're like, oh man, I really wish that this particular skill or this particular concept was taught earlier in the stage in our younger students? And then the second part of that would be, what is the one thing that you feel as that teacher or that mentor that you want your students to come away with at the end of their time with you?
Yeah, well, number one, unfortunately, especially in the jazz department at Julliard, it's very easy to arrive there being a good jazz player, but not necessarily a good technician on the instrument. Everybody wants to have blinding speed. Almost everybody there, in order to pass the audition, have to come with some great jazz ideas. But a lot of times what happens is people have limited their jazz playing to what they could play, instead of improving their playing to improve their options. Mm-hmm. And so in the jazz, not just at Julliard, but in other jazz schools that I've taught at, it's easy for people to say, well, I'm going to play this solo, but instead of playing this difficult kind of lick that I might hear, I'll just go another way with that, because they have an option to move the notes around how they fit,
Right.
And I think it's difficult to teach that with younger students, especially. But by the time they get to the college level or late high school, hopefully the teacher is working with them on, okay, so here are the things that you are not able to play because you don't have the technique for it. So you're taking a shortcut on the solo. You might want to play this, but you can't. So we got to do something with your chops or work on some exercises that improve your technique to the point that you're able to play what you hear instead of just what you can.
Right.
And so, I mean, the students, that I've seen at really in every school want to respond to that. But it also tests their interest in jazz. Okay, well, how bad do I want to do this? Because people, especially when they get to the college level, don't want to have to start over.
Right. You don't want to sound bad in the practice room.
Yeah, exactly. But I will say it's a very supportive institution to be involved in. Winton is always kind of monitoring everything that happens, and the whole faculty basically is really very involved in every student that's there. It's not just, you go and study with one guy. There's a lot of trading ideas and involvement for the student, time for the student to be able to spend with other instructors there. Like you can go, if you're a trumpet player, you can say, I want to get a sax lesson. I want to see what that's like, and because a saxophone player, some of the great ones we have there will say, well, here's some great licks to play. Maybe you can figure out how to do that on a trumpet, because they have ideas that are a little bit different than ours. Because we tend to think on our three valves, and they have all these beautiful keys to be able to move up and down on. So
exactly.
I think being in that situation specifically where they're at, and I'm sure other schools that are very much like that in the chance that the students have exposure to all of the instructors and can, get a better focus on what their options are as a player and expand just out of the trumpet, 3-valve trumpet context and just the range that we have and all of that, and try to play some transcriptions of solos written for other instruments or that were originally played by other instruments.
Right. Yeah, I know. I mean, that's always been kind of the kind of a standard, I guess, for so many people. Is like, regardless of what instrument you play, if you're going to play jazz, you need to, read out of the Omni book. You need to learn the Parker stuff because, that's the language. It's not so much just the instrument, but, that was the foundation of so much of the music that we play today. And if you can't understand it, then it's, going to be infinitely harder for you to fit into the structure of things as they are. But, so, you're saying, obviously there's a level of technical proficiency that needs to be there to, the facility to express the ideas that come out of them. And, there's the classic of, certainly listen to as much music as possible. But are there any other things that you would suggest for people in terms of how to increase their creativity, to open up their minds and their ears, their hearts, if you will, to new expressions of music as opposed to, just playing another 32 bars of rehashed Freddie Hubbard licks?
Right. Well, listening to Freddie Hubbard's never a bad thing to do, but I will say that the real tendency I think that we tend to do is lock ourselves into just trumpet players. And there's a lot of wonderful music and invention out there that if you'll listen to, I mean, you can learn stuff from listening to percussion instruments, if you really try to do that. So I think it's mostly just getting off the fact that all jazz is played by a trumpet player. And just because you play the trumpet doesn't mean it all has to be limited to what the easy stuff to do on the trumpet is. There's some great players out there who have really learned how to make some crazy. I mean, even with synthesized trumpets, that you can even just still play them with the 3 buttons. Even doing that is opening your ears and mind to options that it's real easy to get locked into. And so you have to constantly be listening. If the only instruments you listen to are trumpet, you're only going to be able to do those. But if you try playing some flute music or listen to great classical players and listen to the astounding precision and technique that they have, trying to develop some of that into your playing as well, then you're going to have lots of interesting things to say as a player.
Yeah. And that's, I forget who I was talking with about this. I I know there are people that gain inspiration not just from other musicians or musical instruments, but gain inspiration from other arts. So the use, the way that a painter will use certain color combinations or strokes, which kind of are reminiscent to the way that we might want to phrase something, or the way dancers move, or things like that. That there's so many different things that can inspire us, and any level of inspiration should eventually be able to be translated into an expression through our instrument. So, I mean, have you ever suggested to your students, that concept, like playing around with taking ideas from something that's not, completely removed from music?
Yeah, absolutely. The room that I teach in, not this year, but the room that I normally teach in is on the same hallway as the dance studios. And I urge my students to go take a look at that. Try to play what they're dancing. Try to take that inspiration and make something out of it. I think we should be listening to classical music. A lot of the great classical composers did some really crazy, far out stuff. Stuff that was way off the Bach and Beethoven kind of concept. And I feel like the more we listen and the more we watch, the more inspiration we have. I actually had a student whose girlfriend was a dancer, and they worked out an entire program of trumpet and dance, and a keyboard player and a harp. Mm-hmm. And it was really interesting. It was really incredibly interesting. And the trumpet ended up making sounds and music that really you wouldn't have expected him to be playing. And the good news is, I love bebop, but there was no bebop in that performance, and it was stuff that people wouldn't normally hear. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's we can be inspired by almost anything, and we just need to have our ears open to make that happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and speaking of inspirations, you were talking about your teacher earlier that inspired you in so many ways and gave you that guidance. Were there any other kind of pivotal moments for you where it's like there was just something that kind of helped you to make sense of things and to move you in a direction that ultimately now you're looking at and going, yeah, this is exactly what I needed at this point in time?
Yeah, mostly it was I had instructors that would encourage me to listen, and there was a period of time where I was just working on shedding on the horn, getting the valves to work and do all of that stuff. But I wasn't really listening a lot. I will say that I can remember, so I'm older than maybe some of your other guests have been, but I can remember listening to Bill Chase the first time. Not the world's greatest jazz player at all, but it was a whole brand new kind of playing, as was Maynard and other players like him that really brought a lot of excitement. That wasn't just tonal; it was just what the range was on the trumpet, what the abilities, what notes are possible that a lot of people weren't thinking. Obviously this goes back to Bud Brisbois and guys like that a long, long time ago. But as a young kid in high school in white bread land, it was hearing Bill Chase play for the first time that made me realize, oh, that's possible to do. Yeah. And it's like anything else. We have to learn. We have to have people show us what is achievable, and if we're never exposed to it, then we're not going to really know about it. Yeah. So the biggest thing to do is to listen to what's going on around you. And think of all the composers, especially the avant-garde style composers, who use sounds of the street in the music, street construction and things like that in a performance of their music. And it's not everybody's cup of tea, but it's kind of putting into action. What if I could find a way to use these sounds in what I'm doing, and these ideas in what I'm doing? And it's easy to get stuck. It's easy to say, I'm practicing my Arbin book or whatever book you're practicing out of, and really not get your face out of that. But if you'll just listen and try to recreate, you may not do it exactly, but you might come up with something new.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love There's a quote from Clark Terry, and it became kind of a staple in my vocabulary for a while, which was imitate, assimilate, and innovate. And I think sometimes that people want to skip steps,
Right.
and if you want to imitate, like I'm certainly not. I'm not a spring chicken anymore, But I remember, and this is one of my favorite acts. I used to love watching Rich Little when he showed up on like the Tonight Show and different things, and I just loved impersonators. But to be a great impersonator requires you to really listen and not. I mean, what made him so great was that maybe it wasn't spot on in terms of things, but capturing things like the cadence of speech, some of the affectations, some of the body movements, some of the things that go on that made it a complete performance. So I think sometimes from the imitation standpoint, we don't really, we want to just learn a lick and not necessarily think about it from the full perspective of how that player approached things, and to start to feel that sound. And then the assimilation, I mean, that's the shedding process, because you've got to get it so that it's second nature, and then we can innovate. And I think sometimes people either don't want to listen enough in the imitation stage. These are the breakdowns. You don't listen enough, or you don't really pay attention to the smaller details. You don't shed it enough. And then, of course, at the end, you don't release it, and you don't allow it to become something new. You don't evolve past what it was. So, with those three concepts in mind, I mean, what are some of the tips you might give someone along those three steps of the process of imitation, assimilation, and innovation?
Well, the important thing is to the extent that you can copy. It's a nice idea to copy just to learn the feel, but you should always turn everything that you play. I mean, you listen to a jazz solo, and you might hear little bits and pieces from other players that you've seen or heard of, and people have assimilated those licks and put them in what they do. And that's a good start. That's a good thing to do, and it's good to quote people that were great. And it's really an interesting thing to be playing your own stuff and then just say, okay, I'm gonna go use this lick, and the impact it has on, especially if you're playing for a jazz audience, is like, oh, everybody woke up, everybody's listening now because I did something different. I think the key is to try to use that to stimulate your own ideas. That's what I think most people did over the years, is they were influenced by certain people. You can see the lineage of trumpet players, how this person was a protege of this guy, then this guy, then this person, then that person. And, you have to listen, and then you have to realize, let me go with this. But then what if I took a left turn here instead of a right turn, and start to create yourself based on that. It happens often, I think, for people to say, for a teacher to say, okay, here, I want you to try this lick. Okay. Now I want you to move off of this. When you get to this note, I want you to move to this chord and try to do the same thing in that chord, and then find ways to just keep, translating it and moving it along. And that creates a language that is not just monotone or a copy of somebody else's, but now you're starting to influence people or the listeners in a way that you want to add to that. And at the same time, draw attention to the impact of some great players in the past. We see a lot of musicians coming in who have been influenced by other performers, and it's great. That's what jazz. That's the great thing about jazz. It happens in classical music too. I used to love Maurice Andre as a trumpet player, and my teachers. I would try to copy my teachers, but then after that, you have to keep looking for what's out there and try to take those ideas and then find a way to use them in your own playing.
Yeah. It's that, identifying and speaking with your authentic voice. And
right. Yeah.
I think even societally, that's probably the thing that's gotten us in the most trouble, is, we latch on to someone else's voice, and we never, we can never say anything or do anything or think anything that is contradictory to that established norm. And it's like, okay, learn to speak for yourself, learn to think for yourself, learn to act for yourself.
Right.
And so, yeah, there you go. Life, music, trumpet, it's all the same. Now it's what's kind of interesting to me is the juxtaposition of what we've been talking about, which is this freedom, this creativity, this uniqueness that is part of being a jazz musician, and then so much of your work, in the past, however many years, has been on the Broadway scene, and that is not particularly the go out there and just whatever's going to come out, it's going to come out. That you would have if you're on a free jazz gig. You're expected to perform in a fairly consistent fashion. So how's the mindset, the shift that you would have between doing a jazz gig, a quintet gig, or something like that, and then being in that pit and having to play that same book night after night?
Right. It's got its challenges, challenges. One of the big challenges is that you've got to do it the same every night. You have to literally do exactly the same lick every night. I did a show with Bernadette Peters, Gypsy,
Mm-hmm.
and Gypsy has a big trumpet solo in it. And so the first day of rehearsal, the contractor of the show came up to me and said, "So there's this big trumpet solo, that everybody does." He said, I really want you to make a big splash. I want you to make it a big deal. And so I thought, okay, I'll work on that. And so I had some ideas of where to go with it. You have options on how to play the solo, or what to add to it. Some of it's literally just changes, but inside the context of the original solo that was written. And so I did that. I went in, I just thought, I'm going to go for it and see what happens. And I can remember him coming up to me afterwards saying, "I asked you to make a difference, to make something spectacular, and you did it." And he patted me on the back. And then he said, "Now do that every night."
Okay.
And I realized at that point, I finally realized, okay, maybe I shouldn't have done all that, because now I have to do it 8 shows a week, And on top of that, somebody else has to come in and sub if I've taken off and play that solo, and they will not have had as many opportunities to have gone through it and all of that stuff. But it worked out pretty well, and it was fun, and I like a challenge, so it was a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
So and then we also got a chance to do it live on the Tony Awards, so that was a fun thing to be televised all over, thinking, wow, now I got to live up to this thing that I have to play every night.
Yeah.
So you're right. The smart thing to do would have been to just kind of tone it down a little bit. But that contractor got me all hyped up, and I thought, this is great, because he's going to keep hiring me. And he got mad at me about something and never hired me again after that show. But so that part of it didn't pay off.
Oh man. Well, there's with the Broadway shows and things like that. I was having a conversation. We'll hang with Paul Barron,
Mm-hmm.
and Paul has written a book on the Broadway trumpeter. So basically, excerpts from Broadway shows for young trumpet players to start learning the repertoire of Broadway, since that's something that certainly is lacking in terms of study material. So what are some of the basic skill sets that if you're going to be mentoring someone on pursuing a career as a Broadway musician, as a pit musician, what are some of the things that you would say, hey, look, dude, you need to be able to do this on the horn, and you need to have this kind of mindset, and you need to have this kind of ethic or whatever. What are some of the key points that you would want to steer people towards?
Well, the biggest, maybe start at the bottom of this list, but they're very important. Get used to playing in the dark in the pit. Get used to not having enough room around you. If you look at a symphony orchestra lined up on the stage, there's 3 feet of space between every chair. That's not going to be like that in the pit where you end up. And, so there's just certain technical things like that. Also get used to the fact that you got to play the same thing every night the same way. And that can be, it's great because you can read a book on your stand while you're doing it if you want, because you'll have it memorized in a couple of weeks. But you got to keep doing the same thing. And like my mistake on Gypsy was now I got to keep pulling this off. And that kept me at least awake through that, paying attention. Playing the same show every night is, it's easy for your mind to wander. It's easy to get your concentration off, and you don't have that option. Very much like playing in a symphony orchestra, the conductor drops the baton and starts conducting through. And plus you're doing 8 shows a week. So it's a little bit more playing than you would have to be doing if you were in an orchestra. The conductors, have, they get to sub out, when it works well for them. So there's always a sub conductor. You have to be willing to change what's different about that as well. In some shows, you change keys if the star is out of the show and doesn't do it in that key. So you have to be ready to do that kind of stuff. The big thing is just to understand that there's a considerable amount of pressure, not pressure, but importance of playing the show the same every night. So if somebody comes back and sees the show 3 weeks after their first show and says, well, wait a minute, that's not the way it was. They want the show to be in every way just like it. Not only that, but the people on stage are used to the cues that are in the music as it is. So you've got to pull that off every night. Paul, I totally agree with the book. It's a wonderful book that he wrote. And but we have a responsibility to always be in the same place at the same time in every show that we do, and expected to do it every single night. Mm-hmm. And it's, once you learn something pretty well, it's easy to kind of lose your concentration. So you have to really learn how to stay focused, and you have to learn how to do a warm-up that gets you. You might have done a recording session earlier in the day, and now you're going to come in and sit down and you have to have a warm-up that gets you to the place to be able to play what you're doing right there. Mm-hmm. And just know that it's live. So a lot of weird stuff can happen. Somebody can fall down on stage. You never know. There's some pretty odds. Somebody, one show I did, somebody dropped their kid into the pit. Literally they were leaning over, looking down so that they could see the stringed instruments, and dropped this, I don't know, it's like about an 8-year-old kid probably, and maybe not that much, maybe 6, and just dropped them into the pit during the show. And wow, weird things. We had a dog get loose in a theater once. There's a bunch of different, because it's a different show every day, although it's got to be done the same way.
Right. Right. I was going to ask you, what's the weirdest thing that you've ever experienced in the pit, but I think those two are pretty bizarre.
Rats is one of them in New York. That's happened a few times.
I can imagine that.
Yeah, they like getting into the pit. I mean, it doesn't happen real often, but the first show I did in town, we had a little rat problem, and luckily they found a way to fix that. But it was a little disconcerting while you're trying to play.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, unless you can play tambourine or something like that.
Yeah, right.
Oh man, when you kind of started talking about like the warm up, getting yourself warmed up for playing, I know a lot of people that just look at the warm up as a purely physical activity. And then others that kind of look at the warm up as a mental reset. So when you're talking about warming up for a Broadway gig, is it one more than the other, or just kind of a fair balance of the physical and the mental?
I think they're both equally important, and I think it depends on the part you have to play. If you're playing a third trumpet part, you can get there not having played all day, and not that that's not an important gig, but the strain on your chops or the work that you have to do as the lead trumpet player are less strenuous. So it's easy to warm up. You have a range that's generally lower, but it's vitally important to the entire section that music be. You have to be as focused as anybody else in the section, and usually there's a little something in every part that will stick out and be out there. So you got to be ready to make that happen. It is important to not allow yourself to just get into. I knew some players who would just allow them to be in automatic mode, and I was never able to do that. I mean, I'd love to be able to just sit down and not really have to think about it and play, but I never had a gift for that. I had to really think about what I was doing, you know. Yeah. So it's about being physically ready, mentally ready, and you know, and then being ready for new things to happen. If something happens on stage, the conductor can say, no, we're doing this, we're going that way, and be ready to jump to a different place where maybe you have a solo that you weren't prepared to play at that second. But there's just a lot of stuff like that happens.
Yeah, being prepared for the the unexpected. That's a tough thing to do, you know. And with being in being in that situation in that show, yeah, I can see how it could be kind of challenging because it, like you said, you're doing 8 shows a week and you're playing it very consistently, but it's that consistency in what can be an inconsistent environment. So got to stay on your toes. So I can certainly see the advantage of that. So when you were a younger player, I know you said that you were not a natural. Yeah. So so you earned all of your skills through your time and your hard work. Were you always kind of a tenacious person? I mean, because that is what it takes. I mean, it takes a tenacious mindset, you know, to be willing to go through the hustle and the grind to improve. You know, is that something that just kind of stuck out in trumpet, because of your love for the instrument, or is that just part of your general makeup?
I think it's kind of my general makeup. I don't like to not do well. You know, not that it hasn't happened. But in anything, I don't like to be the worst guy at it. Like I'd hate to be. That's why I don't play much basketball these days. You know, I'm not going to really get the job done the way I'd like to, so I don't do it. Mm-hmm. You know, I might go shoot baskets, but I'm not going to go with some people and say, "Yeah, mate, put me on the team, put me in, coach." So, for me, it's I always want to get it right. It doesn't really matter. Sometimes I drive my wife crazy because, you know, I'll say, no, it's got to be here. This, we got to make this happen. You know, we're going to do it that way. It's just because, I have an idea of what I think I should be doing and then try to make that happen. The nice part is if you're playing a first part, you get to influence basically how that happens. The style tends to often come off the especially with the winds and brass, off the lead trumpet part or line. And then after that, it's just recreating it every day. But in general, I like to get it right. I don't need to be, I don't really expect to be perfect, but I certainly try to be perfect. Mm-hmm. That happens about 1% of the time that is perfect, you know, but ultimately speaking, I'm one of those people that doesn't like to be the center of his attention. And that includes, playing the trumpet. I don't want to be that. Where did that clam come from? And, everybody's going to know what came from that area where the trumpets are, Right. So I enjoy trying to get it right at the very least, at least saying I did my best to get it right,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's a slippery slope that exists there, that desire to get it right, and perfectionism. The desire to get it right is what motivates us to do the work and to stay on task and things like that. The perfectionism is a thing that becomes actually a sticking point for us because we become excessively harder on ourselves, stressed out, which actually ends up usually leading to a breakdown of the mechanism as opposed to, the free flowing movement of our energies. So, do you struggle with that personally, with trying to balance out the desire to be your absolute best and the realities of that there are inconsistencies that will occur, how do you balance out those two, and how do you deal with that kind of stress?
Well, in my understanding, what works for me is to strive to be best every time, but understanding that perfection is not, especially if you're doing the same show for 10 years or something like that. In some ways it becomes easier to recreate every single time, but in other ways it's okay. Well, you kind of lose your attention to that a little bit, and that's when some errors can come in. For the most part, you start to just play it by ear, and your ear finds it, your head finds it pretty easily, and it actually it cuts down on some potential mistakes or errors. But I really don't think about them. I just think about playing. And I mean, I had people drill into me. Okay, well, try to get this right. I know some players who seem to give no mind to it at all. They just sit down and play great every time. That's not me. I have to think about it, but I'm not thinking to the point of, okay, what if I make a mistake? I just get it right all the time. And, mistakes happen from time to time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, like I said, it's a fine line that we walk on that, because, it's so easy to fall onto the trap of becoming overcritical and overthinking things. And actually, is having that conversation with a fellow St. Louis native, Jim Manley, about that. And that so many people just their head gets in the way, and playing becomes stressful instead of fun. Because they're thinking too much about stuff instead of just letting the music happen. So, it's definitely a yin yang kind of thing. You got to find that right balance, and I think the balance is different for everybody. So you have to find what works for you. But that's one of the reasons I like to talk about stuff like this, because I think everybody, for the most part, we all suffer from the same problems, the same type of problems, and how you deal with it may not particularly be the way that's best for me, but at least it gives me a different perspective. And I want to try and get as many different ways of looking at a problem and the possible solutions as possible, so that even if I don't have that problem right now, when it does creep up, which it eventually will, then I've got a toolbox that I can pull from to help me to deal with stuff. Right. So that I think that's one of those cool things. All right, well, we're gonna do we have two segments that we need to get through today before I can call it a hang. And the first one is I got to do this. We got to talk mouthpieces. This is our geared up section, so we're going to talk gear. But I don't want to just talk standard gear. I want to talk about what you're playing, and particularly what your approach to gear is in terms of what you're looking for out of gear, and maybe some tips that you could give people about how they can approach their gear if they're looking to make a change or needing to make a change. What are the kind of aspects that they need to be aware of as the determining factors? Not just who's the endorser.
Okay, well, that's a lot of stuff. Let me say, first of all, but in terms of gear, and if you're comparing gear or trying to find the right equipment for something, number one, make sure that you're physically in the same place you were the last time you played, or normally when you play. If for instance, if you're trying out mouthpieces after you've been on vacation and haven't played for 2 weeks, you're not going to learn anything, and you can't find it. So number one, be physically ready to make a decision. So you're making sure that you're at your peak playing. And then the other thing is this, I think it's easy to begin to rely too much on mouthpieces, trumpets, extra stuff. I mean, I'm speaking to that, and I've got trumpets and mouthpieces laying all over my room here, but I basically have been through a bunch of mouthpieces, and literally within sight of me, there's about 300 mouthpieces here.
Hey.
And but most of them are all gone, are long past, haven't used them in years and years and years. And I let my students come and work on them. If they find one, they can take one. So number one, the real instrument is what's behind the mouthpiece. So all of that has got to be together. Your fingers, your chops, everything's got to be ready to do what you want to do. And then I always take a buddy when I try out equipment, somebody to stand in front of me who I trust as a player, and not only a player but an excellent musician, and then play and say, okay, what was the difference between this one and that one, where you're at, and I think that's extremely helpful to us. I've also had some instruments that were made for me, and taking time with the people who make the instruments has been a great learning experience for me. And, because I've had them made for me, I can kind of always know how that's going to feel. And it tends to work for my skill set, whatever that is, lack of skill or enough skill, whatever it is, it's designed to either cover my mistakes or make it easier for me to play one way or the other. Mm-hmm. And so I think a lot of people tend to do that. That's why you can go out and get this guy's trumpet, or, the Wayne Bergeron trumpet, or the Marvin Stamm trumpet, or whatever. The thing is, if I buy Wayne's horn, that's not going to make me sound like Wayne. It might help, but still the instrument is what's behind the trumpet itself.
Right.
And so number one, that's got to be the thing. If you want to make something happen, you got to make all of this work well and work right. And then try out scientifically, not really, I don't know if it can be scientifically, but systematically, try out one thing at a time and see how that works. And then start to compare that with what you played before to see if that's going to make something different. Of all the trumpets I have, I like that I have some that are just different, not just the same, so that I can use that horn for this kind of playing and another horn for that kind of playing. But I think the main thing in terms of equipment that you choose, it doesn't do any good if you haven't played in 2 weeks. Trying out a trumpet is probably not yours, or making a decision on a trumpet is probably not the smartest thing to do at that point.
Yeah.
But I try out everything on mutes, mouthpieces, trumpets, valve tops. I know one guy who tries out, he has got to have some special kind of top cap on the valve. And it makes a big difference to him. To me, it doesn't really seem to matter, but it just depends on what matters to you. What do you need to do to be able to be consistent and have confidence in the equipment that you're playing? Think how much race car drivers go through every single inch of their car all the time. Now we don't have the same sort of difficulties they do, but we kind of need to make sure it's always in good working order, that we're using the right equipment. I see that you have Robinson's Remedies there. Every trumpet player I know has a bottle of that in their trumpet case. And that's a way to get this part of the instrument, your lips, working. Mm-hmm. And you can always know that if you feel a little swollen, okay, well, that's what you can use to make that happen. I'm not trying to do a commercial. I just saw that sticker on your stuff and thought, well, that's you're going to find one in every trumpet case you can find, because that gets the physical part, the body part, in the right place in case it's hurting, if it's not right.
Right. Well, actually, you did bring up something interesting there, and I've heard this argument, from so many different angles about the placebo effect, and okay, well, heavy caps, they help with the slotting and intonation. Well, no, heavy caps don't do anything, or heavy horns, heavy walls, all these different things. And, of course, I have not seen, I'm a little bit of a geek. I am a geek. I don't want to say a little bit. I am a geek, but even more so than just the trumpet nerd geek, just kind of a science geek in general. And I've actually asked a couple people who are manufacturers, and they're like, well, the science says this. And I'm like, okay, well, what science? What research? Can you show me the research? Because I don't have a problem sitting down and reading a journal article and looking at that sort of experimentation and deciphering that. But So some of the stuff I think, yeah, okay, well, there maybe is a quantifiable difference that it makes. And in some cases, it is simply a placebo effect. But the truth of the matter is that if you think it's going to help you to play better, you're probably going to play better. Simply because you're feeling more confident, you're feeling like the horn is going to respond for you the way that you want it to respond. So therefore, you don't set up that level of trepidation that's going to trip you up eventually. So where do you stand on things like that about if it feels good for you, then it's good for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I'm trying out it makes a big difference to me when I'm trying out the horn. If I'm looking for a new horn or something like that, I might say, do you have different caps on this to try? I personally feel like if you put enough weight on the trumpet, if you're using heavy caps on the bottom of your horn, I think it can change your sound. The question is it change it to a sound you want to hear, or a feel that you want to have, or not? I don't really like to have a lot of weight on the trumpet, and that doesn't work so well for me. And I don't have weights on my mouthpieces or anything else like that. They're just a standard cut. But that doesn't mean I disagree with them. I just haven't found one that I kind of feel like the more weight I have on it, the less control I have over what I'm playing. It's just more work to try to manipulate that extra weight into doing the things that it does, whatever that is. I've certainly played horns with heavy bills and with heavy caps. I have a Monet trumpet here that's real dark and heavy, and I like it for some things, but only because it's good for those things. It's not my everyday thing, but it certainly has. I'm sorry, it's not a Monet. It's. I don't mean to do that. It's like a Monet. It's what do we call this? A Van Laar.
Okay. Yeah.
And his stuff is very heavy, but it works on that horn. Now, I don't play lead trumpet on it. It's for a whole different sound. And I think it's a great idea to play around, just like race car drivers will work on bending a foil a certain way. They can feel it. Mm-hmm. I don't know that it made any difference if they won the race, or if the people who are watching the race could tell that the car was faster, but for us, whatever works is a great thing. For me, I tend to go light on the trumpet. I'm heavy enough by myself. I don't need the trumpet to be any heavier. And I certainly feel like it's everybody's prerogative to say, even if it's only in your mind, if a heavy cap makes you feel better about it, or if your horn is a special kind of color or shiny, if you feel better and it makes you play better, then great. That's fine. I don't try to make that many adjustments to what I do. I pick out a trumpet when I try it, and then for the most part, but that's the way it stays. Every once in a while, I'll put a different mouthpiece in it, but that's to accomplish a different gig or a different quality sound.
Mm. Okay. So I guess that this, to sum it up, you use the right tool for the job.
That's it. Excellent. I could have used that, but I have in the past, but that sums it up, I think, really well.
Yeah. So, okay, cool. So, for any of you out there who are looking to try out some new horns, just don't call Chris. He's not going to go with you to listen to.
I'm happy to go with him. My thinking is get it right there. So when you're at the factory, get it the way you like it right there. And you can say, can you do this here or add that here or do all of that? But after that, once I pick it out, I just play with it. Yeah. That's just the way it is.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, we have one last segment to get to, and this is brought to us by our good friends at Robinson's Remedies. This is the Robinson's Remedies Rapid Fire Round, and this is a series of questions, Chris, that are going to go all over the place, much like my chops at the end of a 4-hour gig. So there's going to be random questions, and just want your quickest answer. And so we get to know a little bit more. We get to dig deep into your mind here. So
okay, well that's not going to be a pretty sight, but I'll do the best I can.
All right, well here we go. Starting with your First question. Who's the biggest influence on your life that's not a trumpet player?
Wow. Oh, I'm not supposed to just answer the first thing, huh? My parents.
Okay. What's your favorite book?
The Bible. How's that?
That's a good one. What's the worst movie you've ever seen?
Oh, you know what? I'm thinking of the movie. I can't remember the name of it. I've forgotten the name. I got up and left, and I don't know. I can't tell you the name of it.
That's
it was so bad. I paid for it, but left.
That's a sign that it was a bad movie.
Yeah.
If you weren't a trumpet player, what would you want to be?
A teacher.
Okay. Let's see. What's your favorite drink?
Diet Coke.
You could have a dinner party, and at this dinner party, you're going to be able to invite any three living people. Any three people in the entire world could come to this party. Who would you want to have there?
Putin, Doc Severinsen, and my best friend Dave Rogers, also a great trumpet player.
Wow, that sounds like a very interesting dinner. You have 3 additional seats there, and they're for any 3 people from history. You're going to be able to bring any 3 people from history there to have a seat with you. And who would those people be?
One of them would be the guy who invented the trumpet. I don't know his name, but I'd love to have him at the table. I would love to have Abraham Lincoln. I thought he did some really brave things, and being able to hear how that all went would be great. And I'd love to have one of my parents back at some point. They're long gone, but I'd love to bring my dad back and talk with him with those guys.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Lacquer, plated, or raw?
I like them all, but on different horns. Okay. Some horns seem like they work, others don't.
Okay. What's your favorite quote?
Hit it hard and wish it well.
All right. It's like a double A. Just hit it hard, wish it well.
That's it.
All right. What is your greatest fear?
Having to stop playing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You could be granted one superpower. What would it be?
Reading people's minds.
Man, that could get you into a lot of trouble.
It could, but it sure would give you a lot of answers sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. It could keep you out of a lot of trouble, actually.
That's true, yeah. Right.
All right. What aspect of trumpet playing do you feel is the most overrated?
You know, I'm stumped at that because I think it's all very important. If I had to just say one is less important, how fast you can finger. And yeah, that would be it, because I know a lot of people who have blazing speed, but I don't necessarily agree with what they sound like or what they're playing.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that would be it.
Okay. All right, cool. What aspect do you feel is the most underrated?
Sound.
Okay. You're given the ability to go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice about music. What would it be?
Practice harder.
All right.
And it was going to be not to get married to my first wife, but
well, that's going to be.
But if it's got to be musical, that I will say that improved my musicianship to some degree.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, that was going to be the second question, which is, what advice would you give yourself about life, besides not marrying your first wife?
Okay. To make sure you find the right person and the right people to share it with.
That's a very good one. I can agree with you 100% on that one. And final question for you, Chris. What do you want your legacy to be?
Yeah, I have done no thinking on that, but I'll just say that I'd like for people to think that I tried to help, whether it's on a musical level or a personal level. I want people to know that I cared and I tried. You know.
All right. Well, That is a great thing to aspire to. And, I share that with you that, that I just want the world to be a little bit better, and play a part in that process. So, I really thank you though, because you really helped me out a lot today. This was a great conversation. It was great getting to know you. And I'm looking forward to one day being able to sit down and actually have that drink in person. And, maybe once Broadway opens up, if you're back in the pits, I'll come and throw my kid into the pit. So you have another story.
That would be great. I've really enjoyed it myself. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you. And thank you for listening and watching and whatever you're doing to share this time with us. Make sure that you share this episode with a friend, because there's some really great information in here. Chris is a phenomenal player, a phenomenal teacher, a phenomenal guy. So thanks once again, Chris. And thank you. And as always, peace and slide grease. We're out. Thanks for hanging with us today. This podcast is all about creating deeper connections through our mutual love of music and the trumpet life. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast and also like and share this episode with a friend. We want to see the hang grow for show. Please support our sponsors and consider becoming a personal supporter of this podcast as well. Remember, for less than the price of a bottle of valve oil a month, you can keep this podcast moving smoothly. The Trumpet Guru's Hang is recorded at the Candy Factory, a co-working space and social club located in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Jose Johnson is the executive producer. Post-production editing is by Mitch Bowers. Our opening theme song was composed and performed by Lexi Signor, and our closing theme music comes courtesy of The Greatest Funeral Ever. Incidental music is by Ethan Swayze and Jose Johnson. Graphic design by Ann Kirby of the Sweet Corps. The Trumpet Guru's Hang podcast is produced in collaboration with the So Good Lancaster Media Group.